All right, it is now about 6:30. We're going to start our meeting. First, I'd like to welcome everyone. This is the June meeting for our wards 1 and 8 NPA, and we're going to start off by introducing ourselves. And why don't we start in the room here? And Keith, you want to kick us off?
Okay, I'm Keith Pillsbury on the NPA steering committee for Ward 8, and I live on University Terrace.
Richard Hilliard, live on Highgrove Court in Ward 1.
I'm Tom Darenthal. I also live in Ward 1, and I'm on the steering committee.
I'm Jonathan Chappell-Sokol. I'm on the Ward 1 steering committee, and I live on North Prospect Street.
I'm Angie Chappell-Sokol, and I live on North Prospect Street.
Sure.
Hello, I'm Martine LaRocque-Gulick, and I am a resident of Ward 4. I'm here to introduce myself tonight to say hello.
And introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mila Grant. I'm on the Police Commission, visiting from Ward 3.
And on connected via video is, it looks like Jack. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Jack Hansen. I'm the East District City Councilor. I live in Ward 8 on College Street. Good to see everybody.
Jean?
Hi, I'm just sitting in here. We'd like to be an attendee, but they need more participants, so I might join in later. I'm
Okay.
on East Ave.
Allie?
Ward 1.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allie. I'm the Ward 8 representative.
And Sharon? Sharon, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hi. Good evening. Sharon Busher, East Avenue.
And Kathy, you want to introduce yourself? You're also on mute.
Kathy Alwell, Ward 1, School Board Commissioner. Well, I'm really East District School Board Commissioner, but I live in Ward 1.
Okay. Well, welcome.
Can I introduce myself?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, Carol.
That's all right. I'm Carol Livingston. I live in Ward 1 on Calarco Court, and I'm also on the steering committee.
And I'm sorry, I missed Fletcher as well. Fletcher, you're on mute. All right. Oh, wait.
Did you say my name?
Yes, you're good.
Sorry, I'm having technical issues and I can't really hear. So I guess I'm from Ward 1. My name is Fletcher, and I may or may not be able to hear you.
Okay. We're next moving to announcements and speak out. And you have a, Matt, you have an announcement? Oh, we should have announced you.
That's okay. Hello, everyone. My name's Sam Heinrichs. I'm the CEDO liaison for the NPAs, and I just wanted to let everyone know that there's going to be an upcoming virtual meeting on the Trinity campus rezoning project. That's going to be taking place on June 23rd from 6 to 7:30 p.m. It is virtual, so there's no in-person option. There will be a Zoom link in these notes for this meeting, as well as all the other NPA meetings that will precede this. We want as many people as can come who are interested and want to have their opinion shared on this project.
Okay. We're gonna move ahead to speak out. If Jonathan, you have something? Oh, Carol, go ahead.
Hi, I just had a quick announcement as part of the steering committee. July and August, we will not have our usual NPA meetings. Our next meeting will be in September on the 14th. And we're hoping to start serving some food. So hopefully look forward to seeing us again in September together over a meal as well as the meeting. Thank you.
And Sharon, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, am I unmuted now, John?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, thank you. I have two things. One is that it was reported that, and the school board members know that the amount of money that the school can bond for is about 150 million, excuse me. And the price tag for the new school is over 200 million. They have some money in reserve, but there's a gap of $35 million. And I'm hoping that there will be unity between the school administration and the city administration and the school board and the city council to prioritize bonding for this high school. We've already had such an impact on the students in this community. They're deserving of a high school and a technical center that is, I think, close to the high school, because some students actually take courses in both scenarios, and to suggest to move it to the airport, I feel would provide a disservice and a disconnect for some students and make transportation another challenge. I hope that the administrations will trot down to Montpelier and ask for some financial support, since they applied a restriction on our contamination that was not able to be achieved by any institutional building in the state. And now they're having to rethink that. So I feel that the state really should financially help us fill that gap. That's statement number one. Number two is that, as all of you know, that we are having to be focused on redistricting. And I would respectfully ask the Ward 1 and 8 NPA, but especially the Ward 1 segment of this joint NPA, to ask their representatives, Councilor Hightower and Councilor Hanson, to explain their positions on redistricting and the impact it has on Ward 1. I've been following this, and I highly recommend that all of you listen to the tape on this past Monday to understand some of the positions held, but I feel that they should speak for themselves. I feel some councilors are definitely advocating for their sections of the city and trying to protect the integrity of the ward. And I feel we're very vulnerable. We already know that we are home to more students that live off campus than any other ward. We won that. We got that award maybe 2015 or 16. And with the expansion on Trinity campus, we will have more students than any other ward if you combine on and off campus. I feel that we really need to also have a good balance of homeowners in our ward, and those boundaries need to be looked at carefully. So I respectfully ask the NPA to ask for our counselors to provide them with the information. And just like they're having a special meeting on the Trinity campus, which is very important, I think redistricting is key, and I hope that you will ask for some kind of involvement. There are maps that this ward should look at and weigh in on and give feedback to our counselors. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think.
Looks like there might be a question.
Go ahead.
I'd like to address this to our city councillors and anyone from DPW who happens to be looking in. As some of you know, I have been working as a school crossing guard for the last 5 months since the beginning of the year. I I could say a lot about public safety, but one of the quick fixes that we could do, and my beat is North Street, is to, for the first time, I believe, for 3 years, start painting the lines on the pedestrian crossings and stop signs and traffic lights. We saw crews from a company in Barry working weekends to put bike lanes signified on many of our local streets. I think it's just about time we started looking after pedestrians and children and those who have a tough time with pedestrian crossings, including drivers, and put some clear white lines to distinguish where cars should stop and where pedestrians should be able to cross. I think it's a grave delinquency and a disservice to everyone except for cyclists who are not, as far as I understand, subject to any city municipal discipline whatsoever. Thank you.
Martine.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. I'm timing myself so I don't speak too long tonight. I know you're not doing a candidate forum, so I'm here just to say hello and introduce myself. Martine LaRocque-Gulick, I'm running for state senate. I am your neighbor in Ward 4 and an active NPA participant. Being here tonight is so interesting, and I'm thinking we should cross-pollinate more because I love hearing about the lines on North Street. I was really thankful that Sharon brought up the high school. Thank you. And the tech center, Sharon, thank you for bringing that up. But I'm here just to say hello and to tell you that I am running for state senate as a Democrat. I am someone who grew up in Vermont. I went to South Burlington Public Schools. I've been a teacher for 30 years, a coach, a librarian, and this year in particular, being on the school board, I'm in my 3rd term on the school board. I really spent quite a bit of time in Montpelier, and I'll tell you a little bit about that journey. But obviously, I know that you've all acknowledged that the high school and tech center have had a really hard couple of years, not just with the pandemic, but with the forced closure of our campus. But let me tell you a little bit about the journey that I had this year in close concert with Kathy Alwell. The two of us worked with a group called the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity. And we testified in Montpelier and we did a lot of advocacy around the student weighting formula. Some of you may be familiar with that. It is a way that the state funds education. Students are funded in different ways. And in Vermont, students living in poverty, English language learners or masters of other languages, and students living in rural communities are funded under with some what was called a weighting formula. And in 2019, there was a study done to see how that formula was behaving. And it was discovered that for about 20 or 25 years, those weights have been out of line with what they should be. So we advocated for the implementation of those weights because obviously in Burlington, we have students who fall into those categories. And I can tell you as a high school teacher working in a different district, I saw the disparities firsthand. And I always wondered what was going on, why one school district was so well resourced when another one wasn't. So we did a lot of advocacy. We got the House to pass a bill called S-287, which was then passed in the Senate, and the governor signed the bill a few weeks ago. We obviously still have work to do in terms of the implementation, but it definitely felt like a win. And I realized during that journey that there was a need for more educators and folks in Montpelier who really understand education. It's a big chunk of our budget at about 1/3 of the state budget, the Ed Fund. So I'm someone who really wants to be in there working on issues that are critical to families and to children. So I'm here in Chittenden Central. It's a new district. It's most of Burlington, most of Essex, and all of Winooski and a little chunk of Colchester. So people are still sorting that out, but the South End is not included in the Central District. It's part of the South District. And there are 3 open seats with 1 incumbent, and there are 6 people running. So I would be grateful for Burlington's support as one of your state senators. That's almost 4 minutes. I went over the 2-minute limit a little bit, but I would be happy to answer some questions, or at least try to answer some questions if you have any.
Great questions from people online. I don't see any hands up.
Okay.
I'd like to say, as I said informally before, that Martina's presented to the MPA, the Ward 1 MPA, on 2 or 3 occasions in the past, and been a compelling advocate for everything that's good in Burlington schools. So I wish her every success.
Thank you. Yeah, last time I presented, we were at the hospital. So this is a new location, but thank you very much for that. And I have a website if you want to check it out, martinelarockgulick.com. And I'm going to be knocking on doors. So I hope to see a lot of you, and I'll be seeing our city councilors very soon as we work toward a solution for the high school and the tech center. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, our next agenda item is a discussion on public safety, and we have John Merritt and
Yes,
I'm saying that right?
you are. Thank you.
From the police commission, and on our end, Steve Pillsbury is going to run through some questions. I hope you. But for people that are listening in, please write your questions down as we go along, and after the set of questions, we're going to field questions from the audience. With that,
The effort here is to make sure that we bring forward questions that we've heard throughout our community in the East District and make sure they're asked, but also to help people put together their own questions after this discussion so that they can talk to you. And we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Milo and John. Okay, I'm just going to ask the questions, and when you're finished, I'll ask the next question, okay? The first question is, please introduce yourself and include your vision for public safety in Burlington and your role in accomplishing that vision. I'll let you trade off who goes.
Sure, I can start. Is this on? Hello? Okay, my name is Mila Grant. I identify as a Black female. I was born and raised in New York City. I came to Burlington the fall of '82 to go to UVM, and I decided to make Burlington my home. I've lived mostly in wards 2 and 3 with a brief stint in the South End, and I've owned a home in Ward 3 for about 20 years. I started becoming involved in issues of policing after the incident with Jeremy Milley and his brothers that really stunned me in a way I didn't expect. And I put in an application to be on the committee to review policing policies. And then later I joined the police commission, and I've been serving for almost 2 years now. I feel that my vision is simple, but I recognize how hard it is to obtain. I feel we want a public safety system in our community that treats everyone fair and equitably, regardless of their background, and incorporates a variety of options, such as the CSLs and CSOs, which I'm sure everyone's heard about lately. We have park rangers coming, and in addition to our sworn officers. And I feel that type of combination is what's best needed in order to properly address the wide variety of issues that lead to the type of incidents that our department has to deal with. I see my role is an advocate for people in our community. I talk to a lot of people in Ward 3 and in Ward 2, and as an educator around policing issues. And also, I feel I try at least to play that role sometimes with the police department to educate them on how the community feels or what the community is lacking in terms of engagement. I talk about the engagement or what I perceive as a lack thereof a lot. And that is something that I'd like to try to be more involved in, but I'm not sure where that would go at this time. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is John Murad. I'm the acting chief of police and have been since June of 2020. I was born here in Burlington and grew up out in Underhill. My parents were both professors at the university. I left the Vermont for college and was kept away by jobs and other opportunities for a very long time, but always wanted to come home and got that opportunity in October of 2018, where I came back here to be the deputy chief of operations under then Chief Del Pozo. My vision of policing is simple. The police exist to keep people safe by preventing and responding to crime and disorder with and for their neighbors. And that is an encapsulation of an ethos that has existed since at least 1829, when Sir Robert Peel created the London Met and the first modern police agency, something that superseded or took the place of what had previously existed, watches, city watches. Unfortunately, in this country, histories of both labor opposition and slave catching were components of what policing was, but the Met changed that, as did northern police agencies starting in the 1840s and 60s. Including this one that dates back to 1865. So that's my sort of vision. How do we accomplish that? You know, I think there are a lot of different ways. We are at the cutting edge of a lot of different things that are being talked about in policing around the country. We're doing them here in ways that not many other communities are. And many of those things have come out of the department itself with regard to expanding the role of the community service officers, or CSOs, unarmed, unsworn people who are capable of addressing certain kinds of quality of life issues. Our community support liaisons, which we created. I created just last year, really, to fill a role that was missing, to address a significant service gap between what officers or employees of the department can do when arriving at a scene, and then what happens before you can get to various kinds of social services. So these are mental health care experts, social workers, people with backgrounds in substance use disorder and in houselessness, who are employees of the city and the police department and do follow-up work on cases after officers have addressed them. Now, a lot of this is discussed at much greater length than I'll be able to discuss it here, and also with pictures and different kinds of imagery in a document that we just posted on our city website, a modification to last year's priority response plan. We created last year a priority response model because we were experiencing drastically reduced headcount and increasing calls for service, particularly priority 1 calls for service, as we categorize them. That has only continued into this year. Our headcount is even lower than it was. We have had to modify that priority model. We are only sending CSOs to certain kinds of calls, which are delineated in that document. And we are also reserving certain calls for detectives and also for online reporting. And this is that document, the priority response plan. It's about 30 pages long, 20 something pages long. It talks about our downtown deployment plan. It talks about numbers as of the 1st of June with regard to certain kinds of calls, calls for service and incidents. And it talks also about the gunfire incidents that we've been experiencing, although it does not capture the most recent one that involved a possible exchange of gunfire at Roosevelt Park and the injury of a former city council member. It doesn't capture that because it happened after June 1st, but all of that is in that document. There's a whole bunch of other data that is at that website. Huge amounts of effort with regard to transparency and opportunities for the public to understand what it is that the department does and what the data around the department is.
What is your view of the current status of the police department, and what are your concerns about the department?
Sure.
John?
Thanks again for that. Our concern is staffing. We are drastically understaffed, and we cannot provide the kinds of public safety that our community has grown to expect and that frankly our community deserves with our current staffing. When the discussions about staffing began in June of 2020, on this date, as a matter of fact, in June of 2020, there were 61 officers available for patrol. And that is not our entire, there were 91 officers, but there were 61 dedicated only to police patrol. 3 lieutenants, 6 sergeants, 46 officers, 1 emergency response officer, 2 SROs or school resource officers, and 3 officers on field training at the time. Right now, from that 61, we are at 29. We have 1 lieutenant, we have 6 sergeants, and we have 22 officers available for patrol. At this moment, right now, where we have 2 sergeants on duty, we have 2 officers on duty and 1 officer in field training who does not count as a solo officer because he cannot patrol by himself. He has to be with one of those other officers. We have 2 CSOs. We have built up that capacity. There are 2 officers at our airport, and there is 1 street outreach worker, a Howard Center employee who's currently on the clock and probably will be off in about 3 minutes. So when we look at what we have to provide services to this city, we are drastically understaffed. And that is the single biggest issue that is facing this police department and this city right now. We do not have adequate public safety resources for a city of our size and a city of our scope.
Thank you. With regards to the staffing crisis, one of my great concerns has been the narrative within the community about what has caused this staffing crisis and the making it very political. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd and others, Eric Gardner before him, Sandra Brentland, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the list goes on and on and on. The protests that followed, the increased scrutiny on police departments, not just here, but nationally. We are not in a bubble. We need local solutions, but we are being affected by what's happening nationally and within the state. The amount of resignations and retirements increased dramatically, and we were affected by that. With regards to the vote to adjust staffing, there wasn't anything that was voted on that fired officers. They chose to leave. My concern has continued to be, are we really doing our best to address the root causes of why they left? Someone asked, well, the mayor asked me, he said, why, you don't believe them? And I said, of course I believe them. I never said I didn't believe them. I said, we're not really truly addressing the issues of why they left. And one of the big issues at the top was a feeling of not being appreciated or welcomed into this community. And I think a lot of that is due to how politicized everything was made. It was made into a very us versus them. And instead of, and I'm going back to engagement, and instead of improving the engagement and addressing concerns in certain parts of different communities in Burlington. You know, as a person of color, I could tell you that our experiences can be very different from a white person in terms of experiences with police all overall, experiences of how responses are handled in certain neighborhoods. And I think at times that some of that just hasn't been heard, and people responded by voting for particular counselors that listened to these concerns, and then those counselors voted a particular way. So we have to understand we live in a representative democracy, And we can't just blame counselors when they're put in place by their community. We have to address what's going into the community in order to improve the relationship and make these officers feel more welcome, especially the officers that have chosen to stay. They need support. I'm not one of these people who thinks, oh, you got to abolish. I mean, I see what certain things that are happening that do require an officer. Not appropriate for CSL, not appropriate for a CSO, they will require an officer. So we do have to support more of the officers that have remained, but we have to be honest about what needs to be done in improving engagement and communication, two-way communication with the communities. Thank you.
Milo, do you want to pick this next question up and go first?
Sure.
The Burlington Police Department annual report was recently released, as we saw. What issues in this report will be addressed by implementing the CNA recommendations? What is the overall status of implementing the CNA recommendations? Maybe you could just explain what CNA stands for.
Certainly. CNA was the consultant that was chosen. There was a RFP that was put out. Several companies replied. These companies were reviewed by a police commission and the City Council Public Safety Committee, and CNA was chosen to do the evaluation of the department. They came forth with their list of recommendations, which was reviewed by members of the Police Commission and the City Council's Public Safety Committee. I do recommend that everyone take a look at the spreadsheet that was created. There's really not enough time to dwell in it, but there is a summary of each recommendation. There is a summary of the status of each recommendation. Is it something that is actively being worked on? Is it something that will be worked on in future quarters because there was just no way to address everything at once? Is it something that's been addressed and is not really done, because we don't want the recommendations to be considered done. We want them to be on changes that are ongoing and incorporated into the day-to-day of policing in our community. There are a number of things that are itemized as being related to the contract negotiations, which have started. So we won't know how those will turn out until the new contract has been finalized. But anything related to that is itemized. In terms of the report, I feel that in general, things that advise the department with regards to updating certain practices so that they reflect best practice. Things that talk about oversight, transparency, things that talked about some of our directives that needed to be updated. Sometimes there's just a simple change in language, to make sure that the language in the directives is person-centered. And also for the department to recognize and consider that bias could play a part in the continued racial disparities that we have experienced, and advocating for training with respect to that and other things. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
That was a very good summation of it. There's really not a lot more to what we have with the CNA report. It had a number of recommendations, approximately 150. They were poured over by a committee. We're awaiting sort of a final tally of which ones are to be looked at and to start going for. I think there's a final report that's due, or a final piece from the Public Safety Committee. And several of those things are things that we'd be able to put into place relatively quickly, particularly small changes to directives. Others are going to be longer term. Others are already in play. Of the 150, I believe that the police department agreed with in whole or in part, or was already doing about 93% of those. So we're eager to try to implement some of those.
Hey, John, you're up next. In the month of May, in the Old North End East and Centennial Front Porch Forums in Ward 1, There were 16 postings under the heading Crime Report and 8 discussion posts concerning illegal drug use. The community is clearly concerned with the level of illegal activity. How does this institution, the Burlington Police Department and the Burlington Police Commission, monitor and respond to local concerns?
Thanks for that question. So with regard to local concerns that are operational or crime oriented, we have a button at the website that allows people to make narcotics tips. We've seen that increase greatly, the number of narcotics tips. We have obviously our system is based on calls for service. That is the bulk of what police do, is respond to calls for service. We are more in a responsive posture than we've ever been, because our ability to be proactive and to be out in the public looking at some of these things or attempting to forestall them before they become problems is drastically limited, owing to, as I said, if there are 2 officers on the shift tonight, the likelihood that they can pull away from those calls for service in order to address things that they know are happening in places. I have heard ad nauseum from my lieutenant, my area lieutenant, and we don't have those anymore either. But it used to be that I've heard ad nauseum from my area lieutenant that the folks on Mansfield Ave are really peeved about people going too fast or running those stop signs. So I'm not answering calls right now. I'm one of the 2 officers that are only dedicated to C area. I'm going to go up and park on Mansfield and wait for some people to run some stop signs and see what I get. That's impossible when we have 2 officers patrolling the entirety of the city. When we have the best case scenario for us right now is 4 officers on a shift and all 4 appear for that shift. And that's not always the case. We only have officers 86.3% of the time by contract, because people are entitled to leave. And so our availability factor, which is a mathematical structure based on the contract, is that I have each individual person 86.3% of all the days. And so that alone minimizes the possibility of us having all 4 officers on shift. Then we have other issues. Are they training? Are they sick? Do they want to go to their kids' graduation today? And as a result, most days we do not have the 4 officers who are assigned to each shift, 4 officers on each day shift, 4 officers on each evening shift, and 2 officers on our midnight shift. When I have all 4, we put 2 in what we now call the CCA, the city center area. And this too is described better and with visuals in that report that I mentioned on the website. We put 2 in the CCA. We put our 2 CSOs that are assigned to each shift in that CCA as well. Again, I don't always have 2 CSOs. They too get vacation. And then I take 1 officer as a Rover North and 1 officer as a Rover South, which this question references. What does that Rover South cover? Covers everything from Maple down to South Burlington, and covers everything essentially from Union up the hill. That is way too much for a single officer, far too much for a single officer. So what is that officer able to accomplish in that? Mere radio response. Keeping up with the radio is a full-time job, and they can't do any of the kinds of proactive engagement that would have been a part of enforcement in the past. Our narcotics unit is down to 1 permanent officer, a supervisor, and 1 officer who I'm sacrificing from the road. And I don't know how much longer I can do that, but I don't have that officer on the road because I have him in that narcotics unit so they can address issues. I know there have been a number of complaints about Macaulay Square. I know that we have concerns about activity there, and there are concerns that we take seriously. So we have this narcotics team looking into a variety of cases across the city, and people's complaints drive where we go with the resources that we've got. So, how do we respond to local concerns in an operational sense? In that way. With regard to local concerns in a complaint sense, not a criminal complaint. In other words, somebody broke into my car, or I believe that there's narcotics activity in this park, but complaints about officer conduct, we deal with those directly with the Burlington Police Commission. So every single complaint goes to the Burlington Police Commission and gets reviewed with the Police Commission. Furthermore, a source of concern in any community is the ways in which officers use lawful force. Police officers are empowered to use force, and they have to at times. There is no avoiding it. And every single use of force conducted by the Burlington Police Department is made public and is available at that same website that I talked about. You can link to them. You can read them all. You can see the demographics of each incident. You can see the pattern of each incident and an explanation of each incident. And I've been working on this for quite some time and have not yet been able to do it, but I am authorized to hire a redaction specialist so that I would be able to put video of certain kinds of uses of force out. I'm having a hard time hiring. Actually, I just got an influx of a couple additionals because college is ending and some folks with good, AV skills are potentially interested. So I'm hopeful to get that position hired. But once that happens, I will not only be putting out narratives of every single use of force, I will be putting out video of most uses of force as well. So those are how we respond to local concerns. My door is always open. In the days before COVID, attended every NPA meeting. I still make an effort to attend them when I can. And just last night, I was in the Old North End for a meeting at the Boys and Girls Club with residents who are concerned about some activities associated with people who are houseless in the Intervale and the cusp of the Intervale. And we're concerned as well about that shooting that we just had, the 12th of the year. So those are the methods in which we address concerns.
Thank you, John. Milo?
Okay. I do not want to get into a long diatribe. I will just say that I strongly recommend watching the last city council meeting, which reviewed the annual report. When you look at use of force regarding incidents where a person is being violent, there's no difference between black and white. It's the same. When you look at use of force against individuals that are nonviolent, we still have racial disparities.
Excuse me, Milo? Can everybody hear? Can everybody hear Milo? I'm having a little bit of.
Yes.
Can everybody hear?
Okay. Okay, got you.
Could you speak?
I will speak louder.
Thank you very much.
Regarding the annual report, it shows that when you have use of force where it involves someone suspect who's being violent, there is no difference between black and white. But when you have use of force, when a person is not being violent, it's not a violent crime or offense or incident, there continues to be disparities. The statement that there is no avoiding use of force is not completely true. I have seen incidents where things could have been handled differently and where officers were not in immediate danger. And that's really important. I would not expect an officer to put themselves in danger. So I feel that is very important to say, because I feel that Acting Chief Murad has been very misleading in that way. The only other thing that I would add is from a community engagement standpoint, what I want to hear more from the department. We know they're shorthanded, that is clear. What can the community do to help the department help keep us safe? The department needs the community to be their eyes and ears. Now, in some parts of the community, we don't have that trust. That trust doesn't exist. So that's going to make it harder for some things. But overall, if we can build that trust, the community being the eyes and ears for the department is going to be crucial. Like you, I've seen many things posted online, but I've also seen things where people post, this is what was taken, this is what it was looks like, this is the report I filed, this is the officer I talked to. If you see it, call this officer. And there are situations where people are getting things back because someone saw something and called it in. So we need to expand that. we need to take more of an active role in our safety. We're in the time of year where crimes of opportunity normally increase anyway. And because of the issue with drugs and people looking for, funds or things they can sell for a quick fix, we have constantly cars being broken into. We've had an issue with car thefts, but we have a lot of issues where you have people not locking things that they need to lock. We have not been a city. Even when I came here in from 82, I was like, what, you leave your stuff open? Yes, I was from New York. Yes, I was more conscious, but it has not been a city where you can leave your windows and doors open. We have always had crimes of opportunity, and we shouldn't fool ourselves to think that that is something that police can prevent. They can come in afterwards. They can try and see what they can do to get things back. But you can put 100 officers on the street tomorrow. They cannot be next to every unlocked car, every bicycle that's not chained up appropriately, tools on your porch because you don't want to keep them in the house. Everything is up for grabs these days if it's not locked up. And we have to be mindful of that. We have to help ourselves. We have to do a better job of knowing our neighbors. If someone doesn't look like they should belong, wait, I don't know you. You make sure you tell your neighbor, I'm going to be away, or I have guests coming. We need to increase that communication among ourselves. So I would like to see the department do more engagement to say, what can the community do to help them during this time and ongoing. Thank you.
If I may,
I think she answered question 6. We were going to ask you both. Did you want to add anything about the NPA, Milo, before I ask John to talk about that?
In number 6?
Yeah. What do you see as the role of the NPA in public safety?
I think the NPA can be part of that communication, that community communication. I think it's a way to communicate with the department, get information from the department, and then get it out into the community. What are the trouble spots? Making sure everybody knows to use the tip line. Things that get called in the tip line are not really appropriate to call in 911. So people being educated about the tip line, people being educated about see, click, fix if you see needles, right? We know that with many reports all over the city about discarded needles. So that type of thing, I think the MPAs can help with. Part of that communication process.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Milo. John, would you go on to 6, that question?
Sure. As I said, I attended every single NPA, not just when I was speaking. I would just go to them as a deputy chief when they were live, and the pandemic definitely interrupted that. And I missed the opportunity to go. I believe that it is an opportunity to talk to people, to just be a presence for folks to make complaints that they have, or to raise issues that they've got or concerns. And I do think it's an opportunity for us to share information about how people can be proactive around their own safety. That said, nothing has changed in the city with regard to the frequency with which people leave things unattended or unlocked or otherwise unsecured. And yet, our larcenies and our vehicle thefts and other kinds of crimes, including burglaries, have skyrocketed. The fact is that there is study after study that talks about the fact that mere police presence is, in fact, a deterrent. It is preventative. The idea that it's not is absurd. I also take great issue with the idea that I am misrepresenting.
It's not true.
Of course. So,
and you are.
I am not.
You are.
With regard to
the Austrian case is public.
With regard to uses of force that don't involve violence, I actually went through many of them with the police commission when the report was revealed. And of the uses of force that are ostensibly for nonviolent misdemeanors, we have a use in which the crime was drug possession, which is nonviolent. And it was a nonviolent misdemeanor because it was a misdemeanor level of drug possession. What was the incident? The incident was a report of 2 college-age males wearing, and these are all Black subjects because that was the issue, 15 incidents that involved Black subjects who were arrested for nonviolent misdemeanors and were the subject of a use of force. 2 college-age Black males wearing black and gray hoodies pushed their way into a residence and assaulted the caller. Officers located the 2 men in a car and then saw a third hiding under another car, and they ordered him out at gunpoint. The use of the gunpoint was the use of force. Upon taking him into custody, they recovered cocaine from his person. That was the misdemeanor nonviolent drug possession. A DUI suspect who tried to flee after crashing his vehicle. Officers used force to stop that flight and take him into custody. DUI is nonviolent, and it was physical force, no injury. Non-compliant handcuffing, which is a use of force. Anything that is not a person turning around and voluntarily putting his or her hands behind their back is considered a use of force. This is a female with mental health issues known to be aggressive towards law enforcement. She had been the subject in 5 previous incidents that day, moving through different parts of the city, committing acts of vandalism and simple assault. In this particular instance, she was arrested for a lewd and lascivious because she was partially naked and taken into custody with non-compliant handcuffing. A negligent operation, and this was relatively a sad case, an elderly male who was driving very erratically. He tried to elude officers and then crashed his vehicle. They spoke to him at the side of the vehicle, attempting to get him to exit voluntarily for quite some time. He did not. They ultimately had to bring him out of the vehicle. That was a use of force, gentle pulling under his armpits to get him out of the vehicle. They called it a use of force. It was negligent operation of a vehicle. That's a nonviolent misdemeanor. Disorderly conduct fighting. This is an incident that actually involved a gunfire discharge, but not by the person involved. The person involved was given a disorderly conduct fighting charge. That has been erroneously included as a nonviolent misdemeanor. It should be a violent misdemeanor. Disorderly conduct is almost always a fighting charge. He was a part of a large melee at the corner of, at the vicinity of the city market, and a gun was discharged during that incident. So responding officers held everybody at gunpoint until they could determine what had happened. Methamphetamine possession, again, nonviolent misdemeanor, but officers pointed firearms as part of an execution of a search warrant. There were other people in that incident who had felony amounts of narcotics because this was a long time narcotics case that they'd been working on for quite a while. And they pointed firearms at a drug crew out of Connecticut during that arrest. One of those individuals was not arrested for a felony, but was arrested for a nonviolent misdemeanor drug possession and had a firearm pointed. There are many others, and I don't want to take up the entire meeting with it, but every single one of those incidents is explainable and clear and is a legitimate and lawful use of force. Again, we make every single use of force public so that the public can ascertain for itself what these incidents are or are not. But the idea that there is a problem there or that I am misleading or misrepresenting, I take great issue with. Because in fact, I give all of that information to the public in as complete a way as I legally can.
What do you see the role of the NPA in public safety?
I think that, again, the component of my belief of what public safety is that public safety, police exist to keep people safe by preventing and responding to crime and disorder with and for their neighbors. And the for part is probably the clearer part, but the with part is incredibly important. And I think the NPA is an opportunity to meet people who are engaged enough to be here in this room on a Wednesday night, who care enough about their community to invest the time to actually come and sit and answer and ask questions.
Okay, I on the way down, I saw 2 needles. I used my glove and picked them up. What do I do with those needles? So what does anybody do who finds them?
Sure. There is a description online that I can share with you that talks about how exactly to dispose of them in a safe and proper manner. You can also report them via C-Click Fix, and C-Click Fix will assign somebody to come and take them. Police will take them if they are in a place where public safety is immediately imperiled, for example, a playground. But generally a
sidewalk
in a sidewalk or a gutter is not going to be a police response. It is going to be in general either a DPW response, or in some cases the needle exchange.
You might have explained to some of our people what we should do with needles when we see them. Thank you very much. The new downtown public safety and activation plan will surely be beneficial to the parts of the East District covered by the downtown patrols and supports. How can you reassure us that a single Rover South officer will be able to handle issues in the remaining extent of the East District, along with the entirety of the South End, beyond Oak Ledge to the Winooski Bridge and to Bayberry Commons? I lost who goes first now. Would you like to go, Mayhew? Thank you.
Well, I think the chief covered some of this earlier, but I would yield to the chief with regards to this answer.
I cannot reassure you. I cannot reassure the city that that is sufficient for that area. What I
Last-
can say is with regard to the question of what the community can do, we have a rebuilding plan. The mayor has articulated a rebuilding plan, something that can get this department back to a functional level of service, both with regard to officers and with regard to these new resources that we have invented and built here in Burlington, CSOs, CSLs. It will take a strong contract. It will take resources that are need to be allocated in this coming budget, but it exists as a plan, and it has a potential for us to be back to functional numbers by the end of 2025. It takes far, far longer to rebuild something than it takes to break it. And it takes resources to rebuild something.
How do you each of you see the role of the Burlington Police Department and the role of the commission? What is the role of each in addressing public safety in Burlington? Is there anything you want to add to that? I think that might be what I'm at.
No, I mean, I wake up every single day thinking about public safety in Burlington. That is why I work 55 and 60-hour weeks. That's why I'm not home with my family right now. That's why trying to figure out when I go to my daughter's graduation tomorrow afternoon, morning is difficult with the meeting that precedes it and things that follow it. Sunday afternoon, took some time. My wife and I went and saw Offenbach's Orfeo in Hell down in Middlebury. It was really wonderful. And within 10 minutes of arriving back home, I had a call that I had to go to Roosevelt Park because we'd had another incident. I live and breathe this every single day. So what is the role of the BPD in that? The role of the BPD is that they are at the front lines of it. They are not alone in it. They have to have the community's support and the community's cooperation. Public safety is a shared responsibility. It is a shared responsibility between all. And talking again about Sir Robert Peel and sort of the notion of this idea of Peelian ideals, he said the public are the police and the police are the public. And the difference is that the police get paid to do something that is incumbent on everyone on some level. So I believe that the role of the police is to be at the forefront of doing things that all of us need to be doing with regard to keeping a strong, safe community. It's a tautology to say it, but a strong community is a strong community. And a community that behaves as if it's a strong community is a strong community. We cannot cede the public areas, despite the fact that we're concerned about activities in them or concerned about people who are in them that make people uncomfortable. We cannot cede our public areas. We cannot cede our ability to have shared public space and great events and take advantage of all the things that make this city the best city in New England. I came back to this city to live here because I love it as much as I do. And we cannot allow it to revert to things that we have moved past.
I think we really need to be honest about the state of community engagement. We need a lot more of it. We need to repair relationships in certain parts of our city. We cannot build back up the department if we don't look at these things honestly and address them honestly. Because if you're an officer in another part of the country thinking about a lateral transfer and you Google us, you're going to read stuff that's going to make you not want to come. So we've got to create more positive outcomes with regards to community engagement and support of the department that will help to counteract some of these things that people would see. The Kathy Austrian case, what happened to her and her child, that she went public with that. I encourage people to read about it. I encourage people to look at it and tell me if that was something that was necessary. I am open to discuss this with anyone who would like to talk about it. The other thing I would like to add with regards to number 6 and also a little bit of 7 is that I would like to see more people watch and listen to and I know with everything going on in our lives right now, it can be difficult, but if you can watch a little bit at a time on Town Meeting TV on their YouTube channel, but to watch the police commission meetings, to watch the city council's public safety meetings, read the reports, listen to the data, have a better understanding of the data so that you're less susceptible to false narratives, less susceptible to having things be politicized. Two things can be true at once, which is that we have a trend over the last several years where incidents are down, but we have certain types of incidents that have increased. So those two things can be true at the same time. The Police Commission has done what I feel is a really great job in terms of inviting public speakers to come to our meetings when we're not reviewing things like reports. And we try to educate the community on both sides of the issues. So we've talked about wellness for the department. We've talked about extreme situations that officers face and how their responses can be affected. We had a great series with NACOL, the National Association for Civilian Oversight and Law Enforcement. Those trainings are available online, really helping the Police Commission to look at oversight and look at transparency and what we need. And I encourage people, talk to your state representatives, send emails to the governor, let him know what we need in our community to be successful in terms of dealing with things like mental health issues and dealing with things having to do with our drug epidemic. He has not been on the forefront of some of these issues as much as he should be. So it's not just about the counselors. Yes, you should be involved in your city councilors, but also take it to the state legislature as well. We need more beds. Some people, it's not appropriate to put them in jail. You can put them in jail, they come back, they do the same thing because they haven't gotten the proper treatment for mental illness, which might be causing the original problem. Thank you. Certainly. So town.
Sorry to interrupt. We couldn't online. We didn't hear that question at all.
Oh, certainly. So I was mentioning encouraging people to watch the Police Commission meetings and also to watch the City Council public safety meetings. The town meeting TV, here now, thank you, records these meetings and then posts them within 1 to 2 days of the meetings being over. So you can go to town meeting TV, click on videos, and you're able to specify which videos that you're looking for. Also, the most recent videos tend to be the ones at the top. And if anyone would like any links, my police commissioner email is megrant@burlingtonvt.gov or melogrant, melogrant@gmail.com. Thank you.
We really appreciate your taking time to answer our questions. We have people around us that are going to be asking questions.
Sure.
I want to take the time now to thank you. We know it's a hard job.
I'm again sorry to interrupt, but we can't hear this online. Whoever's speaking right now.
Okay. Can you hear me now, Jack?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say that everyone is going to be welcome to ask questions and any of our our commissioner and our police police chief, and Tom Barenthal will be the facilitator. But I wanted to thank you for taking time to come. We know that it's a hard job that you're doing. We're all relying on your job and your work, and we really appreciate all the hard work that you're doing because it will have a positive impact on our city. Thank you. Tom?
All right, we're open to questions. If you have a question and you're online, please just use the raise hand function and we'll go from there. Angie.
Yes, I would like, thank you. I'd like to know if the police commission listens and acknowledges complaints about police activities. I'm wondering if they also listen and acknowledge compliments and accolades for what it is the police do every day, because I can sit in a chair and have ideas about what the police should be doing, but they're the people who are doing it. And I want to make certain that because of the missteps a few years ago on the part of the whole city, COVID, a mess. Portland, a lot of stuff.
Well,
That-
Portland was, forgive me for interrupting, Portland was Portland. It did not represent the movements nationally. Portland had some very unique things going on in that city and should not be used to, I'm not saying that you're doing that, but it has been at times used to denigrate a national movement for justice and equity.
I think my point is that I'd like to see more civility in the civics of these interactions and more respect and less disdain on the part of some people who judge others about what they do. Because I, for one, appreciate the services that each of us are doing in our community every day. And so I just want to be certain that if the police commission hears from people that the police department is doing a very good job, they need to let them know that and support them in that.
Certainly. So if you have time to watch the police commission meetings, and it's also listed on the minutes, there is a segment at each meeting where if we've received messages, commendations, those are reviewed during police commission. So that is meetings, and those are very welcome, and they are reviewed. Complaints, due to the nature of the complaints, they have to be reviewed in executive session. So due to privacy issues and possible discipline issues. So those are always reviewed in executive sessions, but commendations and praises and any messages from the public regarding excellent service that they receive from the officers is indeed reviewed publicly at each meeting if we receive them.
Other questions?
Nancy Kirby.
Want to sit here, Nancy?
I'm waiting for that. Hi, I'm Nancy Kirby, and I live in the Hill section of Burlington. I grew up here. I stayed here for the same reason John came back. I love my city. I have a business downtown with my former husband, and we've been together 48 years, and communication is a big issue around town. And I think that we've set a good example of how we've gotten through our issues. And I have a plastic container in answer to your question about needles that I received from the health department, so that when I find needles, I can very carefully, safely take care of them. It's an often occurrence downtown, and I know everybody knows that. Growing up in Burlington, and still in some little neighborhoods, we have Neighborhood Watch. We have signs that we posted a few years ago, see something, say something. When a child is first born to a family, it takes a village. Everybody says that. It takes a village. And this village is our community. And it makes my heart ache when I hear people complain about the police department. They're working on a shoestring. I know that. I work downtown, and it's nice to see a black and white car go by, you know? But when I walk around my neighborhood, if I see something, I say something. And I might be 5 feet tall and 102 pounds, but I'll tell you, my voice is strong. And I think you was out there watching on Zoom. I like being in person, like John said, when he would come to the NPA meetings. I think Zoom is a very impersonal circumstance that we've all had to deal with. And I think it's very important that we all start coming back to our community meetings. I think it's very important that we nurture these kids that are out on our streets. They're lost. Some of them are in trouble because of it. We need to pull up our bootstraps, tighten our belt, roll up our sleeves, and get busy. That's what we're here for. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Kathy?
Yes, I guess this question is for John. As a retired social worker who, from all of my working years, worked with youth, and in this city, many of the years, but I have worked in Germany as well. Drugs have been a problem in this city since I moved here. Sometimes worse and sometimes better. I guess as also a social worker working in youth work, I also worked as a street worker in Germany. And I often wonder why we in this country don't use them. I know we have a few of them from Howard, but I worked for a group that was organized in different neighborhoods all across the city of Stuttgart, which is a very large city. And when you say that you have 2 social workers, but you're down 30 policemen, why have we not hired or tried to hire more social workers in the interim? Because we know in towns or cities where they have used a lot of social workers that things are better. They are not in a uniform, and people have an easier way, if they know the neighborhood and work in the neighborhood, of calming things down. And I also had 2 years ago, remember there was a whole discussion about CUTS, I think, or CUTS or something like that. It's an acronym for yeah. What has happened with that? Are we working towards that in Burlington or not?
Sure. Those are great questions. So with regard to hiring, in the police department, we've hired as many as we were allocated by the city council. I'm hopeful to have that allocation increased from 3 to 6. That was the original plan that I presented to the city council in December of 2020, and then again in January of 2021. But the final number that was approved was 3. I hired all 3 of those as quickly as I could in the next fiscal year, and they've been working incredibly well. I'm really, really proud of having created this system and the way it's working, and the way it is functioning as a equivalent really of detectives. In the same way that officers on patrol will divert calls to detectives once a call is determined to be a little bit beyond the officer's time, the officer's skill set, the officer's ability to dig in. In the same way that happens, we also have officers deferring cases to our CSLs, our community support liaisons. I responded, says the officer, last night to a scene. I intervened and stopped the immediate threat, but I don't really know what we should do next. Can you help? And the CSLs take that and they liaise with the person, and they help guide that person towards a variety of different services. And they act in a way that really ultimately it's a downstream response from an officer's intervention, but it creates an upstream benefit because we don't end up seeing some of those people again because they're being addressed and their needs are being addressed by the CSLs. So I'm very hopeful that we can get some more put on the books. I am also hopeful that Howard is expanding. It's got a stronger presence than it's had in a while on its street outreach team, which is very similar to what you were describing, really strong. With regard to Cahoots, I put together an RFP for that program, request for proposal. We promulgated that RFP. It described a program that we envisioned, essentially the difference between Cahoots and street outreach. The most salient difference is the fact that Cahoots actually deploys with medical personnel, people who are trained as either EMTs or paramedics and can do certain kinds of medical interventions in the field. And so we devised a plan that incorporates that key component. We did get responses to that RFP. I don't know that they're public yet. They were a little bit higher than we were thinking as far as allocated money. We are currently working with the state in an effort to see if we can bridge some of that monetary gap and get that program rolling again. but it's definitely something that I've been working on. I with Lacey Smith, who is our community support supervisor. She's in charge of my 3 CSLs. Lacey and I wrote that RFP and are putting together that plan. I'm really hopeful that we can get farther down the field with it.
I would also like to say that these positions, the CSLs, the Cahoots model, have had tremendous support within the community. They have been discussed numerous times at police commission meetings. One of our speaker series included individuals who brought forth the model, in particular wanting to deal with issues initially around children that were in mental health crisis. So that's another great police commission meeting to look at to get that additional information. The police commission also supports the additional CSLs, and we have made that support public. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think we've got time for one more question. Allie, you've got your hand up?
Yes, hi. Sorry, it was taking me a little bit to unmute. So I have a question kind of specifically going off of the or 2 questions ago that was asked. So with regards to first call, as I understand it, first call is was that what you were referring to when you were talking about the the Howard Center crisis line?
If that question is for me, no, I was talking about the Howard Center Street Outreach is what I mentioned.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. That was, sorry, that was just I just had that clarifying question. But then I had sort of a second, sort of follow-up question to that. So I know that there are certain circumstances under which, Howard Center is obligated to respond kind of in tandem with police. And I'm curious if there's been any thought given to creating a policy within BPD in which BPD is obligated in certain types of calls to respond in tandem with an organization like Howard Center, or in partnership with something like Is Good, which for those of you who might not know what Is Good is kind of like an initiative that's been proposed by Brian Sheena, who actually works for First Call, kind of to have folks respond sort of as like community liaisons within their own neighborhood. And I'm curious if BPD has given any thought to responding in tandems with those kinds of programs based on certain calls that you might receive.
Well, we routinely go to calls and request first calls presence, and very often, unfortunately, don't get it. They're facing staffing challenges just like many others. I've actually started tracking the instances in which we call for either street outreach or first call, or for that matter, for an internal resource like a CSL, and are not able to attain it. I don't have those numbers yet. We only just started doing it, but anecdotally, my officers have been very frustrated. Our officers, our city's officers have been frustrated for a long time by the inability to get certain other kinds of alternative response to a scene when they need it. And so the idea of going when they are there, vast majority of the time, we're there first calling for assistance, and assistance is not available owing to, again, staffing issues, et cetera. Now, the other issue is that many instances are not appropriate for the arrival of either street outreach or first call until the scene has been secured in a way and rendered stable. There are many instances in which the crisis is such that only officers are going to be able to safely respond in the moment, and those other resources are going to have to remain on the periphery until that situation is stabilized. But the idea of co-responding, as you're describing, or going with these other entities, we work with them regularly, and that includes not just street outreach or first call, but also DCF. And we have relationships that when they are going to do a thing that they believe is going to require additional sort of protection or security, they do call us. Sadly, there are times where DCF has to go and take custody of a child, and that is something that oftentimes has negative implications. It can go south in a lot of ways. We will work with them and accompany them on those calls if we are available and depending on our staffing. First call doesn't do that as often, but every now and then there are instances in which First Call is going to execute what is called an emergency evaluation, or EE. It is essentially an arrest warrant for mental health reasons on a person. A person has been demonstrated to be a danger to himself or herself or others, and that has been signed off on by what's called a QMHP, or qualified mental health care provider. And then an EE can be issued, and that allows for an involuntary custody of a person for a temporary period of time until they can be evaluated. When First Call goes to do EEs, they will very often contact us first and have us go up and assist them. We are also capable of executing EEs on our own, but we are very reluctant to do it absent some explicit threat to a person or someone else in that exact moment. Simply because the idea of sending armed officers in to extract people who aren't actively harming themselves or others brings more risks than benefits.
We got one really last question.
Thank you. Some things that I've heard tonight from each of you, or both of you, is that the staffing levels that we're currently at and will be at till the end of 2025, perhaps.
The earliest, but we're hopeful.
But it forces reactive behavior on the part of the police department, that there's not enough staff to actually have a benevolent presence in the community. And on the other side, there's this problem of engendering trust, that there seems to continue to be an issue of mistrust of the police force. And how do we fix this in the next couple of years, where staffing is not sufficient to actually create more proactive or benevolent relationships with the community when there's not enough people to do it? I'd like to hear from both of you on this. It just seems to be a paradox at this point, that the solution and the problem are in two different worlds.
So before I call them the before times, before we had our staffing crisis, back actually when I was on the committee for policing policies, I've been begging for more community engagement. You know, for those of you who don't know, I DJ, I'm in the community a lot in different ways. I do a lot of free DJing for different community events. I do training up at the university, at the College Station. I'm on the board at the Media Factory. So I'm out in the community in a lot of different ways, talking to a lot. And so I could see and I can hear what's happening. So I am hopeful that we haven't missed the boat. I felt that there was, that my concerns sometimes people feel that I'm overblowing things. I believe that we can make some changes to increase community engagement, and we're going to have to do it in different ways because of the reduction in staff. Now, this can be done. You can, if officers are willing, we can have people go to the police station. One of my projects was, give all the officers, hey, during roll call, top 5 things you want the people of Burlington to know, the top 5 things that you see that are unnecessary for you to respond to. That would be very interesting, I think, to the public. I think giving the public more information about what they actually do. You can describe these incidents in various categories, but to have more specific examples to really educate what is actually happening. And then also to give the same information for the CSLs, the CSOs, what are the park rangers going to involve, but you can take cameras to where they are. And for those that are willing to talk, or you can record them, and you can put together a lot of pieces with, you can do this with high school students. You can do this with volunteers. There's a lot of things that can be done through the Media Factory to make it a worthwhile project that I think would be really interesting to people. But there has to be the recognition, full recognition that it needs to be done differently. Press releases are important, but I think there's been an over-reliance on press releases. Press releases do not get out to the public in a way that they should. So we have to have different ways to communicate. And I think local media would jump on some of these different types of ways to communicate, different types of ways to tell stories that would help improve the relationships and the interactions between our department and our community. But there has to be a will. Thank you.
Commissioner Relo and Chief Murad, thank you very much for coming. I think I actually have my own questions that I'm not going to ask because we're way over time. But I think our steering committee will be discussing how to get you back here as soon as possible and for the discussion. But thanks for showing up, and I appreciate the discussion we've had. Next on our list is city councilor updates. And I think we have all three city councilors here. So it's really up to you guys. On the piece of paper I have, Zariah, you're first, Jack, you're second, Ollie, you're third, but you guys can go in whatever order you'd like.
Awesome. I'm happy to start just because I think you've gotten a few things from me over the past few days, which first is, and I want to say, I think I've said this before, but for folks who haven't heard it, I'm sorry. It's really hard for me to make it in person because I have the board meeting for my job just before this meeting that goes till 7. So I often can't make it on time, much less make it there in person. So I'll probably be continuing to join online until that schedule changes. And yeah, I think two things is redistricting, which we heard about. There's some maps that are online. I'm curious to hear folks' thoughts. I know that there's some principles that we have in terms of wanting small wards, wanting multiple representatives, and the council has had a really hard time making any decisions going forward, as is maybe to be expected. Where I'm at right now, which I haven't talked to Jack or Ali about, but is I'm kind of where I think I want us to look at a 6-word system and potentially have, I guess it would be 7 wards, but basically split into 6 different wards. And then one of the wards is actually split so that the old North End and the new North End would be separate. So they would only have one representative and the other. And then there'd be 5 reps. So there'd be 5 wards that are normal sized with 2 reps. And then there'd be 2 smaller ones that each have 1 rep, which is a little confusing, but it's really hard to draw maps in a way that the old North End doesn't get split up into the new North End just because of the way that we've had population growth. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. The other thing is at Trinity campus, folks got an update from me yesterday, I think, maybe it was today. I think it was yesterday. And I'll also share that, although I'm waiting for a communication from the city attorney, but the university has decided not to renew their memorandum of understanding with the city that we've had for, I don't know, quite a long time, which has some implications. But also, I think just generally, the issue that matters to me the most in all of that is Trinity campus and how we're thinking about what the agreement is between the city and the university in terms of housing students. And so I really hoped that the university would take a kind of more collaborative approach. They haven't done that yet. I'm meeting with the mayor to talk through strategy at some point this week. But I feel strongly that this is a moment to ask the university to be a better neighbor. And I think there's enough of us on the council who feel that way that I'm hopeful that we'll come to some resolution, but I don't know what that looks like yet. And those are the two big pieces. They're in the front porch forum as well, both the link to the maps, and I'm sure Tom can include that in the notes, and then also the Trinity campus update. And I'll pause there and also, just wait for any questions and let Jack and Ally speak.
Sharon brought up something earlier about the impact of the Trinity campus.
We can't hear you.
I think Sharon Bouchard brought up in an earlier discussion, something about the impact of the Trinity campus, perhaps on redistricting. Are we going to see if there is a deal where, say, 500, 600, 700 beds are added to the Trinity campus? Will that change? How will that change the mix of people in what is now Ward 1? And how will that change, how we elect people? Because the mix of community would change, and it could throw the whole balance ward to ward out if that was to, come to fruition in a short time, like within a couple of years.
Yeah, there's like the theoretical thing of like, oh, what is the best thing to do? So we've definitely looked at like how much so Ward 1 is strange, right? Ward 1 is the biggest ward by far of any of the wards already, which means that we have to make it smaller. How much smaller we make it in order to anticipate, like there's different, I guess, like schools of thought of like how much we should try to predict where growth will be in the city and go ahead and make those already at least to the 10% like degree of difference that you can have, right? So do we make 1%, do we make Ward 1 smaller than even like where it should be to get to even again in order to accommodate future growth? I think that's definitely a possibility. I don't know how hard I would advocate for that because I think predictions are hard. But I think also I think we have to have the conversation. I've never actually talked to UVM beyond the one time they presented at the city council meeting to see like what it means if they're like what the right, if we say you can't have the allowances on the zoning if we don't have an agreement, I don't know what that does to their plans. So I think we have to have more of those conversations. And the one thing I want to add, just because I remembered that we had a question on the sidewalks versus the bike infrastructure painting, and DPW addressed this in Board of Finance on Monday. And I don't know why, but for some reason they have all of the lines on the street as well as the bike lanes drawn by a company, and they do all of the crosswalks in-house. So they're working on it, but because they had some short staffing, they're delayed on the crosswalks. But that's, for some reason, I assume it's something about logistics. They do that work in-house and then have all of the like long streetscapes done by an outside contractor, which is why the sidewalks are delayed. And I hear that they're supposed to be done this year, and that's all I know on that. I'm complete.
All right. Do folks want Ally and I to share, and then we can all three take questions, or do people want to ask direct questions to Zariah?
Oh, you can go, Jared.
Okay. Yeah, I think redistricting is a big one. I want to hear from folks, and I can share my thoughts on a couple other things that we did on Monday. So we just met this past Monday. We delayed the short-term rentals again. So that's been, debated for a few years at this point. We're working to hopefully get something in place at our next meeting, but it's very contentious. It's very, the council is very divided on it. But I've definitely taken the stance of trying to be as restrictive as possible to people using investment properties as short-term rentals. So, and a couple other things. So Burlington Electric Department, we approved their budget. They are doing a rate increase of about 4%, but they're also rolling out a new program that allows low income customers to get a 12.5% discount on rates. So I'm pretty happy with that program, and that's going to begin on July 1. And I'm happy if people need more info. It's on their website about how to enroll in that program. District heating or district energy, the idea of taking waste heat from McNeil continues to make progress. Senator Leahy was able to secure pretty significant funding from the federal government. So it's not a firm decision yet, but we got a presentation on that, and they're going to decide. There's a partnership. There's several entities involved, but in the city's obviously a main stakeholder, but the decision is going to be made by the end of the year on that. And it would move relatively quickly if it was approved. And then, yeah, ranked choice voting, it might be confusing if you haven't followed it, but I think it's a good excuse to remind people that city council races from now on are going to be conducted with ranked choice voting. And we solidified the tabulation method on Monday. It's the same method that was used previously in Burlington and is used basically everywhere that uses ranked choice voting. It's what was on the ballot as well, but the legislature had stripped it out of the charter, so we just placed that into ordinance. But yeah, redistricting, my thoughts on redistricting, I mean, I really believe in simplicity, like having a smaller wards and closer representation is a huge thing that I am advocating for, and also simplicity. I want a system that everyone can understand and know who represents them on council. I think the system right now fails on both fronts. The districts are huge. You know, it's 11,000 people for one person to represent, which is really difficult when you're barely getting paid and are working full time. It's really difficult to be responsive to a constituency of 11,000 people. So I think it's really flawed in that sense. And it also takes more money to run that size and takes more resources. So I'm really advocating for, smaller wards and eliminating districts and having smaller wards. And then on the simplicity front is, not having this dual system where you have, as a voter, you're, voting for different size districts that you fall into on each alternating years. So I think, but of course, I want to reassure everyone, because I heard Sharon Busher chiming in at the beginning, is that the Ward 8 piece and eliminating the gerrymandered Ward 8 to me is non-controversial. I haven't heard anyone defending or even attempting to preserve the gerrymandered Ward 8. That's why I haven't focused on it as much, because I haven't seen any risk of that happening. It seems like everyone on the council is on the same page about getting rid of the current configuration of Ward 8. So I certainly will advocate very hard if I hear that anyone's trying to push that through, but that hasn't been a concern for me. And I would love to hear, and I understand, I feel like everyone's on the same page about that. So I'd love to hear people's thoughts on, do you want the difference between having 1 and 2 councilors and just smaller wards versus larger wards? Because those are some of the big questions that we're also trying to work through on council.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Allie?
Sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. I don't know why my computer doesn't want to unmute. But yeah, I mean, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, there's the issue of redistricting. And obviously, I'm the Ward 8 representative. And I think I've benefited in certain ways from that system and how that map is drawn, but I'm certainly not a fan of it. And I've heard from just so many people, including many within this meeting, who are not a fan of how that's drawn either. And so that's certainly something that I, am advocating for in this, redistricting process. And, I think unfortunately this is a tough issue. There's no quick fix. And so obviously we're going to have to make some sacrifices in this. And I'm also interested to explore the sixth ward to representative option that Soraya had mentioned earlier. And so I would love to hear input from folks at this meeting. And, I appreciate all the feedback and the ideas that I've heard so far. And yeah, I mean, this unfortunately won't be an issue to solve, but I do think that we can come to some kind of solution. I would love to hear more from folks. And yeah, I guess related to short-term rentals, as Jack had mentioned, it's being delayed again. And I think our district in particular faces a lot of really unique challenges when it comes to housing. And so I also have taken the stance of trying to be as restrictive as possible. I think that we do really have to take advantage of all of the available housing stock that we can. But I also don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are bigger fish to fry, if you will, when it comes to this. UVM is causing a housing crisis. Period. And I feel pretty surprised to hear that they're choosing not to go through with an MOU. And so I think that we, as the wards and the district that are disproportionately impacted by this issue, can and should really put our heads together in the coming weeks and months. And yeah, I'm also really open to any ideas that you all have in terms of that. I also want to take this time just to echo Commissioner Grant's statements on about community engagement and that being absolutely crucial to making strides in public safety. And I really encourage anyone here to attend our public safety committee meetings and be open to sharing and also to learning. And we welcome people. We would love to have you. And I guess the final thing that I'll say, kind of related to like just some other stuff in the city, is we have the Juneteenth celebration coming up, June 17th to 19th. It's the theme this year is a love story. So the whole event is sort of focused around the theme of like love, and there's going to be music, there's going to be food, some really interesting speakers, and I think it would be a great way to build relationships and celebrate with neighbors. Thanks.
We're moving right ahead here unless there's questions, and I don't see any, but
Share my question.
Yeah.
I've got a question there, or a comment actually. Should I go ahead? Couldn't hear you guys. Thanks. So two things, and I'll try to be quick. Yeah, very interested in hearing folks' perspectives on redistricting. I just, totally, Jack, agree that the large districts, the one that you represent, are just totally unwieldy, and it is, they should be eliminated in whatever scheme y'all come up with. I do believe, and I've kind of pushed some lines around on a map myself, I do believe that there could be a way to equitably design either a 7 or an 8 ward system that really preserves Ward 1 and preserves a lot of the balance between town and gown in in Ward 1, and happy to talk to you guys, offline about that, because, it gets into the weeds and it gets complicated real quick. So, but just to let you know, I do think it's really important, as a longtime Ward 1 resident, to try and maintain as much as possible the historic boundaries of Ward 1, knowing that involves some challenges. The other quick comment is, very disturbed to hear that the University of Vermont does not want to continue negotiating with the city. A little bit of history. I was city council president when we negotiated the first UVM agreement, and that set us on a path of UVM finally realizing that they had to address the impact of students on housing in the city. We also saved Centennial Woods as a result of that, which Sharon was involved in as well. Just as a footnote to history, the reason we got UVM to the table back then, and I'm not suggesting you do anything like this now, but we had to play hardball with this, with the university, because they refused to sit down with us, and we basically held up a zoning permit. This is of somewhat questionable legality, but we held up a zoning permit on a major building. The Stafford building, actually, and that is what finally got UVM to the table. So I would say, not exactly suggesting that, but I'm also suggesting don't be afraid to be pushy and to play hardball, because you need to get the university's attention. That said, Tom, I don't know if you got my email. If there is, I know you're running late. If there is a moment on the agenda before you break for me to just say a few words about my Senate, my candidacy for state Senate, I'd really appreciate it. And thanks.
Sorry if I can just I'll be so brief. The 7-ward map, like perfectly basically keeps Ward 1's lines, because it has been so big that it's so easy just to keep Ward 1, Ward 1. And I think some of our colleagues and a lot of the Old North End folks are very anti Ward 7, because there's no way to keep the Old North End and the Old North End that way. So it's my favorite for Ward 1, but I think I'm the only one of the very few counselors who loves that map for that reason.
Let me put a link to Earhart's map, which is an 8-ward map, which I think is really good. But it would involve potentially different. It would involve some 2-member and some single-member wards.
It also still needs some work, Jack.
I wanted to say that it seems that we're really coddling wards 4 and 7. I don't understand why a suburban ward needs to be called unique when the urban core of our city has all kinds of issues, and the people that are basically going to be the ones that have to continue to maintain or to work through those issues over years are underrepresented because of the students. And it seems to me that I don't know why you think that Ward 4 and 7 have to have their way. I was watching you guys on Monday night. It seemed like they were the big things you had to please. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? There are other parts of the city that really have issues too. And you just seem to be going along as you are, and you demand this and that. And even the people that came to talk to you from that listening committee, that was just an alternative person. And I think that whole listening thing was a joke. They didn't really listen. And when I presented the facts, which they're all repeating now, I was attacked for giving out the facts of how governance in Ward 8 was very hard. And it will be hard if you have a whole student ward. Although the one thing I like about Ward, the 12 ward map, is that putting all the students together, I think with their student government association, they can get a lot more done and be represented much better if they work together and get somebody on the city council from the student government association. That's one appeal to me, but governance with a 12 ward is going to be a nightmare for ward clerks.
Okay, We're running out of time, so we're gonna have to move ahead. But I think Keith, you would be well advised to send your additional comments.
I think they've already received my comments and
So moving ahead real quick, Kathy, do you have a school update for us? You're on mute.
Yeah, I mean, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I was just going to talk really shortly about the $150 million bond, because it was in the paper today, and I don't know, many people may have read that. We are still working with the city, and that is not set in stone. So there are concerns on both sides about the debt policy and how much we can actually bond for. But that number is not set in stone. We are still working on that. We have been closely working with the city, collaborating, and we want to keep working together in order for the betterment of our kids and for the taxpayers. What we have, what Sharon referred to about taking some of the kids, some of the programs of BTC out, that is also not a done deal. We are still discussing that. That has not been set in stone either. And there are a lot of pros and cons on both sides of this. The board will meet again next week and make a decision, but there is a public forum on June 29th that we would like people to please come to. And we are looking at the 60 million, we are not looking at a 60 million funding gap, but it will be between 15 and 35 million, that gap. And we have set some monies aside, and we are also planning to go after other funds, doing fundraising, be it the state and the federal government, to find support for that. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Kathy. I think one of our last items here is a Burlington Partnership for a Healthy Community. And Evan, you've been I think you're still on. Yes.
I am. Yeah.
Very patient. Thanks. And you've got the floor.
Well, actually, I'm going to cede the floor. I'm so glad my coalition director, Mariah Flynn, is able to join us. But wow, what a fantastic NPA meeting. And we couldn't have asked for a better segue, given the conversation about like, what is a healthy community and how do we define that? So thanks for opening the floor for us. And we'll be as quick as we can, because we know you've had a robust evening.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. I am just going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yep.
Let me do that. Great. Here we go. Okay. Awesome. So again, as Evan said, my name is Mariah Flynn. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of the Burlington Partnership for a Healthy Community, which is your local coalition focused on substance misuse prevention. And we are a coalition of partners that work together with the support of staff on strategies that help reduce the causes and consequences of substance use in Burlington. There are a whole bunch of strategies that we work on, but today I'm here because we just wanted to share one specific tool that communities might find useful and give your neighborhoods the opportunity to think about how this might be useful for your ward, or folks in the community can think about that. And I'll try to go through quickly because I know that you all have had a long night, a very full agenda with lots of interesting things to already think about. So first, I just wanted to draw some attention to the Vermont prevention model. This circular graphic on the screen is the Vermont prevention model. It's a socio-ecological model for prevention. In order to effectively prevent substance misuse, communities have to engage in strategies at all of these levels. And the strategies that have the greatest impact are improvements to policy systems and the community environment. So that's where our coalition focuses our energy on those two levels. But it's important to note that there are a lot of other organizations doing great work in the community, implementing programs that work at the other levels, and that it's the how all of it works together that really helps prevent substance use. And another thing that's really important to note as we frame this conversation is that our coalition focuses heavily on strategies that prevent and delay use for adolescents for as long as possible. And the reason why that's really important is because we know that 90% of the people who develop a substance use disorder started using before the age of 18 or by 18. So addiction or substance use disorder really is an adolescent disease. And the more that we can create environments that normalize non-use and support kids to remain substance-free while their brains are still developing, helps them have better outcomes and can help the community really thrive. So I'm going to talk a lot about kids today, even though some of these strategies are also supportive for adults. And I've got my notes on a different screen, sorry, so I'm just so there is a lot of data around substance use for youth and adults in Burlington, and I don't have time to get into a lot of it today, but I wanted to just give you a really quick snapshot to show you a little bit of where we are around substance use in Burlington. So we just pulled out this one kind of data point around substance use. The most commonly used substances at Burlington High School are alcohol, cannabis, and nicotine. You'll see me use the words marijuana and cannabis interchangeably because I tried to stay and use the language that the survey tool uses, but I'll sometimes call it cannabis because that's in Vermont law, that's what we've changed the language to. So on this slide, you can see that alcohol use is the most common substance use of choice for youth, and it has been for a long time. It's also the most commonly used substance by adults in Vermont and the most easily accessible in our communities. But in recent years, cannabis use has really increased and is starting to match alcohol use rates for youth. So in 2015, in our youth risk behavior survey data in Vermont, we started tracking use of electronic vapor products, which is that purple line you see there. And you'll see that there's been a really drastic increase in the last few rounds of survey taking for kids of electronic vapor use. It's something that we're hearing anecdotally that a lot of our schools and youth service providers are also dealing with. And we'll know more about where kids stand with the 2021 Youth Risk Behavior Survey data, which should be coming out this fall. But one of the things that is pretty standard for kids is that the substances they most normally start using with are alcohol, cannabis, or marijuana, or nicotine products. So when we're thinking about helping to prevent or delay use for substances for youth and support responsible use for adults, what we really want to do is help make the healthy choices the easiest choices in the community. And kids are heavily impacted by what choices adults are making and normalizing. So when sometimes in our work we focus on adult use because it supports and normalizes behavior for youth, and it also helps support folks who are in recovery and trying to remain a substance-free lifestyle. So in the fall and winter of 2018, we completed an assessment of all the tobacco, alcohol, and alcohol retailers in Burlington. Our staff and our youth volunteers and some adult volunteers and Department of Health staff went to each of the stores in Burlington. They tracked things like product placement, advertising, location of advertising. Was it under 3 feet? Was it on the doors or outside the building? And we compiled all that data from the audits and we used it to create maps and to look at the geographic impact of retail outlets on our area. We looked at density of retailers and the impact on the surrounding populations. Were there a lot of stores near a school or a youth center and advertising near those places? And then we put that all into an online interactive tool. So that's the resource I wanted to come and talk to you about today. We overlaid some of those maps with things like census data showing poverty rates, things like the location of schools. So you could look at the distance between retailers or density of retailers, and help neighborhoods think about and look at the impact of substance use on the community, and help increase some conversation about healthy community design and how to design the community that you want, and to help grow in that direction of what you want to support for kids and families. So we are currently in the middle of updating that. During the pandemic, we took a little break from this work, and so we're getting back into it, sharing this resource with the community. We're really excited to do that, and to let you know that we are in the middle of working with the Department of Liquor Control right now to update all the audits. So we'll have data on the current state of the state around some of this, although I will say that not too much has changed. We've got a little bit of movement around retailers, but a lot of it's still the same. And once we have the new data entered, we'll add that to the same story map site, and then we'll go through a little bit of a revision again when retail cannabis starts in Burlington in October of 2022 this year. So I pulled out some data from the tool because I think looking at the online tool is a little tricky, although I will share that as well. But I thought just seeing the visuals on the screen might be helpful, might be easier. So to set the stage, just to kind of help us think about why we've pulled out this particular data when we're looking at community level, is that there's some things that have been identified by research as the root causes of youth substance misuse at a community level, which is community normalization of use, access to and promotion of substances in the community, low perception of harm of that particular substance, and then early onset of misuse. I also wanted to share that all of the images that you see in this presentation and on the website that we created are pictures that we took of the Burlington community. So they're all from Burlington, either taken by us or youth that we worked with who wanted to highlight some of the images that they saw as problematic. And I also wanted to just note that that we know that kids are much more significantly impacted by advertising than adults are. And while we know that for alcohol and tobacco, the same is turning out to be true when it comes to cannabis advertisements. So in the communities that have, or the places where commercialization of cannabis has already started in other states, we know that they're seeing some of the same things that we see with alcohol and tobacco, where the more kids see advertising, the more likely they are to have favorable attitudes about use, the more likely they are to start use at an earlier age. Oops. Here we go. Okay, so like I said, strategic placement of advertising, like when places put it at a children's eye level, normalizes substance use in everyday life, and it's an increased risk factor for use for youth. One of the things that we saw in Burlington was some differences between other groups like ours who did some of the same assessment in their communities. So we found that 57% of our alcohol retailers had ads on the outside of the building that were visible from outside the store, whereas the statewide average for that is 32%. We also found that 67% of retailers in Burlington had inside advertising for alcohol, compared to the Vermont average of 59%. And I only pulled a tiny bit of the data just in the interest of time today, but you can read more on our website. And then we also found that there was a number of places where there were advertising under 3 feet, which is something that as a coalition, we're really trying to encourage stores to move away from, because the only ones who really see that are that's really at the eye level for very young children. I pulled out this map for you all for this ward, and I've shared it with one other ward for whom I think it's relevant as well. One of the things that we wanted to share for Ward 1 and 8 is that while these 1 and 8 have a comparably small number of alcohol and tobacco retailers, and probably the cannabis retailers as well when they start in October, physically located in the ward, you will likely experience some of the heaviest impact from density of retailers that are close by in neighboring wards, and maybe that will change as the redistricting happens, that you bump up against. And so we wanted to show you that this was actually some work that some middle school students did for us when we were pulling all of this together, where they were noting that there was a lot of tobacco retailers right around Edmonds and middle and Edmonds elementary schools, and that there was a lot of advertising, particularly at the time, for electronic vapor products as they were walking by on their way to school. So students, for folks who have kids in the district, something to be thinking about, the impact of that. Additionally, research suggests that when there's a higher density of on-premise alcohol outlets close by an area where a lot of college students live or young adults live, that relates to poorer drinking outcomes for college students, increases in heavy drinking, frequent drinking, and other alcohol-related problems. So, while the density isn't happening in your neighborhoods, it might likely have an impact on your neighborhoods in a way that it will not for some other wards. Okay, so I just want to share with you the online tool. I'm only gonna really briefly go through what we have here. So please do take some time to check it out on your own. And I have the link in the PowerPoint, which hopefully can be shared with folks, but it's also on our website, which I'll share at the end. So the first part is just a bit of a preamble. Again, just a reminder that all of these images are from our community in Burlington, but I wanted to just pull you down to the actual maps. So we have kind of 3 things that we're looking at the moment, but we are interested in hearing feedback from folks about what other things are you interested in? Would you like us to be able to provide to help you understand the impact of this on the community? So we're looking at, you can look at density, the types of legal substance use that we have in the community and what types of stores they're in. And then we've overlaid that. You'll see there's some things on this key that are like a school or a community center. So this map is really looking at density areas where there's denser, more retailers. The second map is looking at proximity to schools or youth centers. So you'll see those mapped, and then the darker blue circle is a 500-foot buffer from the school, and the lighter blue circle is a 1,000-foot buffer from the school. So it'll show you what retailers fall within those barriers. And one of the things that some research suggests is that you want to create a buffer from vulnerable populations, and that this is how you can visually see what that will look like.
Hey, Mariah?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna lose our room in about 2 minutes.
Oh, no, okay. So I'm gonna go back then to the presentation. You can look at some of that detail. One of the other things that we look at is poverty in the community, and using census data, and where you see greater density over poverty rates. You'll have to check it out on your own. So in this presentation, we probably won't have time to get into it in detail, but on the website as well, we have strategies that are recommended to help prevent initiation and use when it comes to community level prevention. And those are at the end of the website. Things like prohibiting use in public and at family-friendly events that you might have in the community, and limiting advertising, and advocating for buffers for adult-only products from vulnerable populations. And the kind of in summary, what I would say is that I want to repeat that the earlier people start using substances, the more likely they are to develop problems, and that we want to delay use for as long as possible while brains are still developing. And our legal substances are the ones that kids almost always start with. So it behooves us as adults to be thinking about the social norms we're creating around that and access to and promotion of those substances and how it's impacting kids. And I'll just end by saying that we have a work group that wants to work more on this issue, thinking about how to help communities make the easy choices, the healthy choices. If you're interested and you want to get involved, you can reach out to me or our coalition, and you can find the story map on our website.
Thank you very much.
If it's okay, I might just add one quick thing. In the other wards that we visited, we got some questions about cannabis retailers and the licensing that's happening right now at the state level with the Cannabis Control Board. And I would just say that communities have the opportunity to define what they want that zoning to look like, but they are definitely running out of time to do that if that's something that a community wants to do. And so if that's something that you're interested in learning more about or want to talk about, we're available to do that. But as soon as licenses start being issued to retailers, they will be grandfathered in. And so you really won't be able to enforce that zoning ordinance if that's something that the community wishes to pursue. So thanks for letting me add that.
Thanks, Evan.
Earhart, are you still on?
I actually am, yes.
You want to make an announcement?
I would love that. Thank you. And thanks for the presentation, Mariah. And it's really, and Evan, fascinating stuff. And thanks for your good work. Thanks for the minute just to reintroduce myself to folks that already know me and introduce myself to folks that don't. My name, again, is Earhart Monka. I'm running for state senate from Chittenden Central, the new Chittenden Central district. I know you heard from Martine earlier. So I'm running in that same district. I'm a close to 40-year resident of Ward 1. I was actually one of the charter members of the Ward 1 NPA and helped start it all those many years ago. I was city councilor when Bernie Sanders was mayor. And served as city council president for 1 year. I've been a long time affordable housing advocate for folks who don't know me. And I think it's safe to say that probably one of the greatest crises that is facing our state and our district is the affordability of housing. It is something that I've worked on for years and would be one of the focal points of what I would hope to improve if elected to the legislature to represent you all and the rest of our Chittenden Central neighbors. I've had over 20 years experience as an advocate at the State House, not just for affordable housing, but on a whole host of issues, including a stint of 11 years representing the city of Burlington and its interests at the State House. So my policy experience is really quite broad and goes significantly beyond housing. And I say that just also to say that with all of the folks that are not returning to both the Senate and the House, one of the things that we always want fresh voices, and of course we want more younger folks to be part of the discussion and the decision-making process there. I will just say that I do have the kind of experience with the State House so that I could hit the ground running and really be effective, I think, on day one. So I'll just kind of leave it there. There's many other things I could talk about. And one suggestion I have, Tom, to you and Jonathan and the other steering committee members is perhaps maybe the NPAs could get together and have an all NPA candidates forum. I know that's been something that's been done in the past, and with early voting coming up at the end of the month and the primary coming up on August 9th. It would be great if all the candidates got a chance to talk to all the NPAs at once. So thanks again for giving me a couple minutes here just to reintroduce myself to folks, and really appreciate that.
I like the all NPA forum idea. Thanks.
Can't hear.
Oh, I was just saying I like the all NPA forum idea. So thank you.
Great. Hope you can make it happen. Thanks. Thanks again.
All right, I think we're done. Thank you all for participating, and our next meeting is going to be in September, August or September? September. No later than September.
But we can plan things for the summer that aren't necessarily Wednesday night meetings.
But we need to adjourn, guys.
All right, we're
Thanks
adjourned.
so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.